9 a.m. 2 boys. Dennis Cole, age 8, Robert Bastine, age 9, going down to that pond that you heard about during the view. I asked to look off to the left to see the water. They were going down to look for frogs after the rain the night before. And they discovered tragedy. Discovered the body of John McCabe. 15-and-a-half-year-old boy that they found on the hill that you have seen. And there is no question the death of John McCabe is a tragedy. The sorrow for the McCabe family cannot be without it. It's tragic. There is no question about it. And over the next 40 years, police investigation began. That morning, school parole officers and Tingsboro officers who heard about it through the evidence began to investigate this case, interviewing witnesses after witnesses, recording statements from all of those that you've heard about. And that, as you've heard, investigation was on again and off again. It was very heavy for the first year plus, and then there were lapses where literally decades would go by and nothing was done. But what the evidence that you heard here was an outcome-driven investigation. This case, without question, was a cold case for over 40 years. But cold cases don't get solved over including memories. And they don't get solved over repressed memory. Cold cases get solved with facts. They get solved with science, and they get solved with what you heard about that was found right there in that field that morning. That's how they get solved. Detective Coughlin, when she took this case over in January of 2011, she began this investigation with the exclusion of all others, with the exception of Walter Shelley and Michael Ferreira. Lieutenant Sullivan and Detective Wayne had worked, certainly you've heard evidence that Detective Wayne had worked that case for 10 years. Lieutenant Sullivan told you that he started working on the case with Detective Wayne in 2000. So for a period of certainly 8 years, the two of them worked together until Jerry Wayne got sick and died in 2009. And Sullivan continued. Everything that Linda Coughlin knew, everything that she read, had already been investigated by Detective Jerry Wayne and Lieutenant Sullivan. Everything she looked at, they had looked at. And you heard about some investigations that started back up in the early 2000s, 2002, 2003, a number of witnesses that were interviewed. Nothing changed until Linda Coughlin took the case over. Jerry Wayne and Lieutenant Sullivan knew all about Mike Ferreira's statement in 2003. They knew all about Jack Ward's statement in 2002. The telephone interview with Marla Shiner, Brian Gaff. They knew about the statements with Pig Roast. They knew about if Michael had been talked to at his home in 2003. They knew about Michael Ferreira's statements in 1969. They knew in 2008, Lieutenant Sullivan and Wayne knew about Mike Ferreira's statement that you read the other day. They knew about that statement. They knew what he said in 1969. And they knew what he said in 2008. What did most police officers tell you during the course of this trial? That they take notes as you walk. They write reports after they take their notes. And then when they have to testify, when they have to remember an event, or remember something that happened in the past, they review their reports. Each and every police officer told you that. They review their reports before they testify to refresh their memory. Because an event, even Lieutenant Sullivan, who's been on this job for 30 plus years, he can't remember every case. He's worked in many cases. But he told you, I needed to review my reports to testify before you yesterday. I need to review my reports regarding that. Did you hear any evidence that Mike Ferreira was ever given, when they questioned him in 03 and when they questioned him in 08, was ever given his statement that he gave 2 days after John McCabe was found? You heard his statement from 2008. That was the product of a faded and confused memory. You remember what he said? That he got a ride to the dance so he could then get a ride to the dance by the kid across the street so he could then get a ride from the dance by Nancy Williams to go to her house to wait for everybody coming from the dance. I mean, it's confusing, and it's a confusing, faded memory that is the product of 39 years. I suggest to you he simply confused many nights in the fall of 1969 while he was in high school. High school nights that he confused. He remembered being with Nancy, picking up John McCabe and dropping him off. But he doesn't remember the sister. He doesn't remember that his mother was even at the interview with him. He talks about going to clean a restaurant sometime in the middle of the night. That's not what his statement in 1969 said. That was verified by Detective St. Peter. That at 7 a.m. they went to strip floors and clean floors. I guess perhaps more troubling to you is if 39 years later his story matched exactly his story in 1969. But it doesn't. Whose memory would you expect after 39 years to be accurate? Mike Ferreira's statement in 1969 was consistent. You heard evidence by the witnesses. You heard a number of people that were around the Williams house that night. There's a stipulation from Robert Ryan. Michael's statement in 69 as to his whereabouts and where he was is exactly what he told us to the police. Edward Allen Brown. Yes, I adopted Mr. O'Reilly's movement. Yes, I adopted their beliefs. Yes, I was fed facts. Yes, fear drives my statements. Think about it for a second. The Commonwealth's theory of this case, that John McCabe was being taught a lesson because he was getting on a model shot. In 1969 or 2013, high school kids, if they take the tablet, just punch the guy. To take John McCabe and tie him hog-tied in the field. Does that make any sense to you over alleged high school jealousy? A motive that doesn't exist. You didn't see any evidence that it exists. The hog tie. Oh, they need hog tie. They need hog tying because it's the only thing that fits their motive. If they don't have hog tying, what are they left with? They're left with the McCabe boys manually strangled in a field by the rope. And that's what happened. John McCabe was killed somewhere and his body was left in that field. So they need hog tie. Because you couldn't teach a lesson without hog tying. Hog tying is the only thing that fits in Jack Ward's motive. I want to talk to you and move quickly, I hope, through some of the witnesses. You took notes, and I'm going to try to go through the witnesses the way they appeared before you. Tom Conlon, who's retired from the Lowell Police Department, he told you that he introduced a number of photographs, and he was at the scene. He said there was no evidence of hog tying. Linda King Locklear, she was the steno that came up from Virginia. She was the one that taken the shorthand in the days following the death of John McCabe, where tens of people were injured. I think the Commonwealth, when they presented her testimony, wanted you to believe that her abilities were accurate when she recorded Mike Ferreira's statement. Apparently, there's a stipulation that Robert Lyon's same statement was accurate. Her abilities to tell you, show you the transcripts were accurate. But when it comes to Nancy Williams Ferreira, who used Linda King Locklear's typed transcript of what Nancy Williams said in 1969, on cross-examination, Mr. O'Reilly was saying, you're relying on police reports. You're relying on reports from 1969. That's your only memory of this. So, Ms. King's abilities aren't accurate when Nancy Williams told her statement, told what she did that night and who she saw that night. And if you remember when Mr. O'Reilly and Ms. Locklear were the question answer about what Mike Ferreira told them, the only hesitation that 16-year-old Michael Ferreira paused on was he didn't want to tell the police that they were trying to get beer that night. That's the only hesitation that you heard. David Beek, he told you candidly he didn't really have a great memory. He had to use the reports, the police officer's reports were fresh. But he's the gentleman that was at the Oaks waiting for his dad to come up. He saw John McCabe standing out by the phone booth, just standing there for about 5 minutes, and he wasn't thumbing. He appeared to be waiting for a ride, is what David Beek told you. Jerry St. Peter. Jerry St. Peter verified work records of the floor company. He also told you that Walter Shelley quit that job, the floor stripping job, on October 1st, 1969, some 4 days after John McCabe was found dead. And he started a job after October 1st at Astro Circus. St. Peter drew the diagram. He told you that diagram, that's an exhibit with the foundation and the railroad tower, the hand sketch diagram, I think because he read it. He drafted that. He told you, he identified where the body was, where the car was, and where the foundation was. He attended the autopsy. There were no injuries except for the rope marks. Detective St. Peter told you that the body appeared dry. He said he didn't touch it, but he was there on scene. He said the body appeared dry. Now, he did tell you that the weather was damp at 4 a.m. But he's the one that was with Miss Locklear, Miss Linda King, when Mike was being questioned. He was the one questioning Michael Ferreira. And you remember the questioning. He was asking Michael Ferreira when on the way home at 1:30. Well, wasn't it raining? Weren't the windshield wipers going? Did it rain? And Mike says, yeah, Shelley's windshield wipers were going. It rained at 1:30. Mr. St. Peter read his reports prior to trial to refresh his memory. You may recall when I showed him a report of a meeting that listed him in attendance when the discussion about John McCabe's belt being missing. I don't remember that. So even though that's there, that doesn't refresh my memory. Maybe because I wasn't on his team. He told me, you're on the wrong team. Remember that? This isn't about whose team you're playing for. This is about justice. Now, if you think about the rain at 1:30 in the morning, if you think about that rain, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 23. If you think about the rain at 1:30 and that it's still damp, and John McCabe's body is dry, if it rained at 1:30, look at those tire impressions. Look at, you'll see this in deliberations, but you look at those tire impressions. The rain would have washed those tire impressions away, or certainly not made them so clear. Whoever left John McCabe's body in that field had to do it after the rain. And you'll see what I've looked at this closely. Appears to be paper towel. I was only 8 in 1969. I don't remember if they had paper towels. Or they could be some type of cloth napkins. But look closely at this. Do those napkins or paper towels appear to be wet from rain? Why were they left there right near the tire impressions? Take a look at Exhibit 23. We were ready for that. Barry Moran told you no one was in the railroad tower. Didn't see any lights, didn't see employees. You heard evidence for the alternative. You heard evidence that that railroad tower was staffed 24 hours a day. He told Detective St. Peter on the 27th of September 1969, it was between 10 and 11 p.m. that I saw that red Chevy. And I asked Detective Conklin if at the time they had interviewed the employees of the railroad tower. She said they did, and there was a list of the cars. And you will remember that, although not the same year, there was a 63 Chevy, red or maroon, that one of the employees had. Barry Moran saw an employee's car between 10 and 11 o'clock. David Beat tells you John McCabe at 11:10 or 11:20 is still at the Oaks. Still at the Oaks. The dance doesn't let out till 11. So the car Barry Moran saw was an employee's car. And Barry Moran, calling Mr. O'Reilly Tom, said his memory, after 43 years, gets better with time. You recall that. His memory gets better with time. The diagram, which is 13, you'll see this. There's a car there. Jerry St. Peter told you the reason he wrote car right there was because that's what Barry Moran told him the car was. At the transfer hearing, Exhibit 46, it's hard to see right here, but when you get that into your deliberations, there's an A right near my finger. Here's the railroad tower. Here's the building that, I think during the view, there was a question by one of the jurors in the agreement. Were those buildings still there? And Mr. O'Reilly and I, the judge, told you we agreed that the buildings were not there. So these buildings weren't here. Here's Maple Street. If you look at the A on my finger here, when you deliberate, that's at the transfer hearing where Barry Moran put the red car. There's a road to the tower, and a foundation. There's a road to the tower, there's the A. You put them in the same place. Now, when he appears here for trial, on Exhibit 42, he told you the car was up beyond the foundation. Think about this for a second. Edward Brown, on 2 occasions prior to appearing for you, testified that the car that he was in, according to his story, Shelley's car pulled the first time 10 to 20 feet up the dirt road towards the tower, the second time at the transfer hearing, 20 to 30 feet. So 10 to 20 feet, 20 to 30 feet. That was his prior testimony that I brought out on cross-examination. Where did he tell you on direct examination the car was? Is it a coincidence that Ed Brown tells you it's up here and Barry Moran tells you it's up here? During the view, in fact, during the view, Mr. O'Reilly, we walked up here into the field, and I asked you she's taken you to go all the way back by the bus and walk over here. And I asked you, you'll see. And I asked you, as we stood in the spot, to look at the smokestack off in the distance. And then at the same time, I asked you to look at the railroad tower. And I brought your attention to where the chimney was on the railroad tower. The hip roof, the four-sided roof, and where was the chimney. And then I'd asked you to turn to your right, and I asked you to look at that billboard. And what side of the billboard could you see? The right side. You couldn't see the front, obviously, but the left side would have been facing up Gorham Street. You'll see this, but there's a closer view, and instead of wasting our time on, you'll see it during deliberations. But this was the picture. This is the picture. There's a police officer. You'll see this, but there's a police officer standing right by my finger. There is the smokestack. There is the chimney on the roof line. Not in this picture. You'll see off to the right is where the door was. You will see closer pictures because they were marked as exhibits. You will see pictures of John McCabe on the side of that hill with both the smokestack and the building with the chimney in view, exactly where I took you on the view. That's where John McCabe was left. Not where Ed Brown testified before, and not where Barry and saw it car. And the other thing about Barry Moran, never told anyone before about this reaching up with his buddies, acting like police officers. That's the improved memory. Never mentioned it at 69. Never mentioned it at the grand jury. Carol Ann McFrederick, she was at the dance that night. She danced with John McCabe most of the night. She had the last dance with John McCabe that night. Jack Ward, there's one credible thing from Jack Ward. He did say that John McCabe had a crush on Carol Ann McFrederick. But John McCabe told Carol Ann that he was going to New York that night. Remember that. Going to New York. Carol Ann McFrederick didn't see Marla Shiner at the dance. Mary Ann Richard LaCourciere, she was the babysitter at McCarthy's, Nancy's friend. She says she told you she recalls seeing Mike Ferreira and Shelley at the slider looking for Nancy. Robert Ryan is the stipulation. He's the fella. In fact, Mr. O'Reilly asked Nancy Ferreira yesterday, where does it say in your statement that Bob Ryan, you saw Bob Ryan, your boyfriend, going with Shelley and Ferreira to Lowell for an hour? Right in front of him. And he recognizes, oh, okay, it says it right here. He's the one that was with Shelley and Ferreira from 9:30 to 10:30 looking for the beer trip, you'll remember. Ed Brown. Where do I begin? Where do you begin in your evaluation of Ed Brown? His mother told him his story was wrong. Can you point to one thing Ed Brown came up with by himself? I asked him in the coffee room. What fact did he know? And she said, he was hitchhiking. And he didn't have his jacket. Those are the only two things he came up with. But in the very photograph, I asked her, in the very photograph that you showed him, John McCabe's jacket wasn't on. And the rumors, you've heard about rumors. He was hitchhiking. You heard all about the multiple interrogations and the multiple side steps. You heard about the cooperation agreement. He's telling all these interviews, all these interrogations, all these side steps. He tells version 6, which Linda Coughlin writes down. He gets a cooperation agreement. He gets a lawyer. You're going to get a manslaughter, no jail time deal. And then they put him in front of the grand jury. And Mr. O'Reilly says, where was the rope tied? Around his ankles. Where else? Around his wrist. Where else? I just remember his ankles and his wrist. Was the rope tied around his neck? The answer, I don't know why they would tie a rope around his neck. We are multiple interrogations in, multiple stories in. He's got a cooperation agreement. According to Linda Coughlin in version 6, he's hogtied. Under oath, Ed Brown says, I don't know why they would tie a rope around his neck. Shouldn't he know that? And Mr. O'Reilly suggests he take a recess. And he goes out, and what did he tell you? I read Detective Coughlin's version of what happened. And then I came back in, and now he's hogtied. Sent out for a recess to read the report from Detective Coughlin because he didn't have his facts straight. He admitted that. I didn't have my facts straight. How can you not have that fact straight? John McCabe died of strangulation. Of course there's a rope around the neck. He didn't know it. Let's talk about timing. To you, it's 10:30 p.m. 10:30. I'm home watching TV. Who hasn't used that line before? I'm home watching TV. Why is 10:30 after the 4 or 5 trial preparation sessions important for you? Because if it's before 10:30, the 8 teenagers in Tewksbury would have seen him. He would have seen his own brother and his brother's girlfriend, Jane Thompson. He would have seen Bob Ryan. He would have gone on the beer run. He would have seen everyone. And no one saw him. So now it's going to be 10:30. But what was it before? Under the same promise, members of this jury, that he told you, I will tell you the truth. And your only guarantee he's doing that is because he's telling you that. That's the only guarantee he's telling you the truth, because he said he would. But what did he tell you? What did he tell others before under oath? What did he say at the grand jury? At the grand jury, he says, I remember dropping Marla off at the dance at 7. That was his sworn testimony. I showed him that. He's like, yeah, I said that. And then at the transfer hearing, his testimony then, he remembered physically being in the car at 8 or 9 o'clock. Timing is important in these trial preparation sessions, because if it's before 10:30, you know it does not fit everyone else. Marla, trial, he tells you on one day last week, these are all blending now, for me and probably you, but last week he told you Marla Shiner was not with us on the 26th of September, 1969. I told you that. I asked him that. No, she wasn't there. I asked him at the 72A hearing, you recall, I said, Mr. Brown, June 15th, 2011, I asked you the very question, was Marla Shiner with you? And he said, I have a present-day memory, June 15th, 2011, as he's thinking about it, yes, she's with us. I remember her being with us. But to you, she's not there. And at the grand jury, he says Marla's dropped off at 7 p.m. at the dance. Location. I went line by line through his transcript. Mr. O'Reilly fed him the location. Off Maple. He didn't know the name of Maple Street. As you remember, I was showing you. I don't remember. Maybe Mr. O'Reilly says Maple Street, if that's the name of the street. In a dirt lot by Mr. O'Reilly. Yes. By a railroad tower. Yes. Off Gorham Street. Yes. Take the first right after the bridge. Yes. 10 to 20 feet down the dirt road. He's shown the location at the grand jury. And at the transfer hearing, he says pretty much the same thing, led the same way. Now it's 20 to 30 feet up the road. To you, it's up and around the foundation. The tape. It's gray. Mr. O'Reilly tells him no, it's white. And then he forgets and he says it's red. Where's the tape? Mouth only, not the eyes. At the grand jury. At the transfer hearing, mouth and eyes. Months later. Talk to you about the rope. I don't have to repeat. In the interrogations, Ed Brown is told Shelley and Mike Ferreira are responsible for the murder. These are the facts that are fed to you. You were with them. they're saying you were with them, and it's jealousy over Marla Shiner. He's told by Mr. O'Reilly during these interrogations, he's tied up just like Jack Ward said he was in the French Connection. He's told the motive, Marla Shiner. He's told the method, that he's taken off the street, and that the defendant are with him, the defendants are with him, and you're responsible. And then he's shown photographs. He is shown this photograph. By Detective Coughlin. He now knows the manner of the death of John McCabe. He knows this road everywhere. He knows he's taken. And then, if he's not fed facts, think about this. If he's not fed facts, why in version 6 does he tell Detective Coughlin that John McCabe was tied up just like in the movie, when the movie didn't exist? Why is he told that? Was any explanation ever given to John McCabe as to why this was happening? He tells you at trial, yes. We said, this is what you get for, or Shelley said, this is what you get for messing with Marla Shiner. I asked him on cross-examination, Mr. Brown, that's the first time you told anyone there was any discussion about what happened. His prior testimony at the transfer hearing and the grand jury, he was asked multiple times, not by me, by Mr. O'Reilly, was any explanation ever given to John McCabe? No. One time? No, not that I remember. No, nothing was said. It's kind of difficult to teach a lesson if you don't tell the person what it's for. That just does not make sense. Does it make any sense to you that nothing would have been said, according to his story? Now, threats, Detective Coughlin said no threats were made to Ed Brown. Define a threat. I'm sure no one said we're going to do bodily harm to you. But he was told that he's involved in a homicide. He was told, we're going to prosecute you. We have evidence against you, and you are going to jail. That's what he was told during those meetings, the unrecorded meetings. Why weren't they recorded? Excuse me. Why weren't they recorded? I'll suggest to you, it's not. They weren't. Detective Coughlin was not afraid of what Ed Brown had to say. She didn't want you to hear what she had to say. Detective Coughlin told you only if Miranda is given can we record. Well, Miranda was given on the 2nd of March 2011 and still never recorded. You heard Ed Brown in the questions from me, his denials over years, over weeks, over days, over hours. How many times did he tell you, I denied involvement, I didn't do it? He was met with liar countless times, told he was a liar more times than people remember. The continued denials were met with, we're going to prosecute you, you're going to jail. And then Mr. Brown starts to tell the police, well, you'll recall this, maybe I was with him and I don't remember. And then Mr. Brown told you, when I asked him a question, I said, you knew what they wanted you to say. Yeah, I knew what they wanted me to say. He doesn't want to go to jail for the rest of his life. He said, quote, I knew what happened based on the pictures they showed me. Remember in my opening, I showed you that picture that I just showed you. In my opening, you had heard the opening from Mr. O'Reilly. You had heard Mike Ferreira and Walt Shelley and jealousy with Marla Shiner. When I showed you that picture, you all had a pretty good idea what happened to John McCabe out in that field. Just by looking at that picture in opening, you could determine what happened to him in the field. In version 6 of Ed Brown's statement, he says he was cleaning a restaurant. 5 and 6, he was cleaning a restaurant. Where do you think that came from? Doesn't Mike her say in 2008 he cleaned the restaurant alone? Where does Ed Brown get cleaning a restaurant from? The police, Detective Coughlin, Mr. Brown, who told us, the police asked me if the body was in the trunk. Ed Brown's mental state, he's willing to go under hypnosis. He tells you it's fantasy. And he told you, my testimony is based upon my repressed memory. That's what he told me. I asked him, so repressed memory, Mr. Brown, that's an event that you now recall that you don't recall happening before. And his answer, yeah. So he didn't recall this. He had no memory of this, but now he does. So his testimony to you is based on his repressed memory. Told again, 9th of March, Shelley and Mike Ferreira are suspects. You're with them. Jealousy over Marla. You're involved. We'll prosecute you. We got evidence. You're going to jail. Hearing all that, Mr. Brown told you he was fearful of all that. The police telling him all those things. He's worried about his wife. He's worried about who's going to take care of him. He's being told, you're going to jail. We're going to prosecute you. No, there was no formal cooperation agreement in writing on the 9th of March. Not telling you there was, because there wasn't. But he told you, yeah, well, there was no formal one, but we had informal discussions. Do you remember him telling you, no, from a question from me, from the consul? Was anything said to you or any promises made to you, Mr. Brown, when the prosecutor was asking the questions? Remember him saying, yeah, the DA said he could help me out. And then, he knew what was going to happen. They talked about what was happening. And then after the 9th of March, he's appointed an attorney. Not before the 9th of March. He's appointed an attorney after the 9th of March, to protect his rights after the 9th of March. This is an important point. I went over a number of questions at the transfer hearing, his prior testimony, and the grand jury. When Ed Brown being shown photographs by Mr. O'Reilly, and he was questioned. The last time you saw John McCabe, according to his story, the last time he saw him, his legs, the only difference between the photograph, his legs were now down, because the last time he saw John McCabe, according to his story, the legs were up. And I asked him on cross-examination, you're not trying to suggest, Mr. Brown, to this jury, that during the 30 seconds, according to a story that Shelley and Ferreira are out of the car, that he's untied in the middle of darkness in a field where someone's cut the rope. He said, no, I'm not trying to suggest that. He didn't see that. In fact, he said, as I drove away, according to his story, the legs were still up. Told you that during that time frame he was under tremendous stress. That's why he's got the threat to harm himself and his brother. He told you that the reason, part of the reason he's telling you his direct testimony, coming forward with version 6, is because he has children that he would want to know. Well, then I asked him, Mr. Brown, when you were prepared to go in front of a grand jury in 2008, and when you were prepared to go in front of a grand jury in 2011, you had those same children, didn't you? Yes, I did. And you were prepared to go in front of both of those grand juries and tell them, I have no involvement in this case. I had nothing to do with it. And if I wasn't there, I didn't do anything. Yeah, that's what I was going to tell the grand jury under oath. Prepared to tell that grand jury, I didn't have anything to do with this. One of the last questions I asked him on cross-examination, you may recall this. I went through all of the things that he was involved with. All the denials, all the interrogations, all the grand jury testimony, the transfer hearing, 4 or 5 trial prep sessions with Mr. O'Reilly's office. And before you, he still could not get his facts straight. So, yeah, after all this, I still can't get my facts straight. Why? Because he wasn't there. No gloves. He didn't have gloves on. No one took a belt. Marla Shiner. Marla Shiner came to tell you the story, to tell you what she remembered from 1969. You probably could surmise that she wasn't here to help Walter Shelley. Here's from the evidence that when she was dating Walter Shelley and married to Walter Shelley, probably wasn't too nice. Common sense would tell you if she wanted to hurt Walter Shelley, she wouldn't be here telling you that she wasn't dating him at the time, and that there was nothing with respect to any romantic interest or flirting or any teenager stuff between her and John McCabe. It just never happened. She told you she wasn't dating him. She also told you, back to Detective St. Peter, where is Shelley working? October 1st, he quits and starts a job thereafter at Astro Circuits. Marla Shiner told you the only time I can put to date this thing is when I started seeing Walter Shelley. He was working at Astro Circuits. And she also told you he had already dropped out of high school. Ed Brown told you, Mike Richard, yesterday, told you Shelley was still in high school in September of 1961. Marla Shiner knew John McCabe, but that was it. There was no romance, no flirting, and no Walter Shelley. Mr. O'Reilly, on cross-examination of Ms. Shiner, says, words to the effect, didn't you tell people that you felt like you were to blame for John McCabe's death? You may remember that. He asked Marla Shiner that last Friday afternoon. Didn't you tell people that you felt you were to blame for Marla Shiner's death? And Stan got back up and he asked Shiner, did you tell people that you felt you were to blame? She said, yes. When was that? She said, in 2011, when the news hit that there were arrests made and the news article said that I was the reason. She told you that is not true. And she told you she felt sorrow for the McCabe family that people were being told because it was not true. Linda Coffin, predetermined Shelley and Ferreira, predetermined. To the exclusion of others. She suggests to you, because she worked with Jerry Wayne, that's why, that was her suggestion, because she worked with Jerry Wayne told her things, that's why she focused on Shelley and Ferreira. I asked her, in the 10 years Jerry Wayne worked this case, he never produced one report suggesting that even included Mike Ferreira's name. Not one report in 10 years talking about Mike Ferreira. Detective Coughlin either ignored or didn't know about Robert Morley and the caller to the priest. In fact, back to Mike Ferreira, Mike's name isn't mentioned for 30 years, 1970 or 71, until Private Detective Jack Ward and his theory mentions Mike Ferreira. 30 or 31 years his name's not mentioned. She told you they were always considered suspects. That's not accurate. 30 years without his name being mentioned. So she either ignored or didn't know about Morley or the calling of the priest. Richard Santos, she told you 4 weeks ago when she learned about Richard Santos. 4 weeks ago. She didn't know about Richard Santos. You'll remember who Richard Santos is. He's the one that left that young girl behind in Tewksbury. Tied around the ankles. Tied with her hand behind her back. Mouth taped, eyes taped, and manually strangled with a rope and left for dead. Robert Morley, you heard a little bit of evidence about Robert Morley in cross-examination of Ms. Coughlin and an honor and direction command. Morley was the one with the brothers. You recall the evidence. Mr. Morley's brothers came into the police in November 25th of 1969 to report their death. He came in for an interview and he walked out. And he left to go to Florida on the 29th of November 1969. And the police said that temporarily thwarted their efforts to further investigate him. His own brother brought him in. no further investigation was ever done. Subsequently died. Now, when you focus on Shelley and Ferreira from the get-go, when you put your focus on Shelley and Ferreira from the get-go, as Detective Coughlin did, how can you ignore the calls to Father Walsh and Father Cahill? Within days of John McCabe's death, there was a call to Father Walsh. And you heard Father Walsh. He remembered the call. He reported this to the police. He doesn't even, it's been 43 years. He doesn't have a clear memory of everything, but he told you, I remember the call, I remember it was about McCabe, something about something in the newspaper, wanting to turn himself in. The police had beaten him before, and a meeting was set up at 8 o'clock for this person to come in, and he doesn't remember calling the police, but he said the police were there, and they had guns. And he got a call. He got a call. At 8 o'clock, he said, Father, why'd you call the police? I've been watching the place. He remembers that. And there was never a call again. There was evidence you heard about the gloves. Priests were told about the gloves. And that would have been September 29th or 30th, based on the evidence you heard. Remember this. Not for 2 months. Not for 2 months would police know black gloves fiber was on the cotton tape on the mouth and the eyes. But the caller to Father Walsh, the caller to Father Cahill. Father Cahill took a call about the belt. He said, how do I know I'm talking to someone responsible? And he said, you can ask the parents, Father, and you can check with the police. The boy's belt is missing and I have it. It's black. Detective Farley in that report said, this is true, as the belt is missing and it is black. And Detective Coughlin was asking me questions about that. Well, there were other reports that said there was a question about whether the belt was really missing. And I showed her the report. The only other report talking about the belt is when the detectives went to McCabe and asked Mrs. McCabe, what a horrible event that must be. Mrs. McCabe, where's the belt? I don't have the belt. Don't you have the belt? Isn't that a funeral parlor? I said no. The belt is missing. There should be no question in your determination that belt is missing. And whoever called the priest knew about the belt and knew about the gloves. I asked Detective Coughlin, did you ever look to see whether the college, the priest also said he was beaten by the Lowell police when he was arrested at age 23. Did you ever look to see in your own records whether Richard Santos had been arrested at age 23? He didn't. But he had. At age 23, in 1965, he had been arrested by the Lowell police. What did Santos tell that young girl? I've done this before. I've done this before. To boys and girls. Now, Mr. Jameson, Walter Jameson from Tewksbury PD, and Sergeant Braden, those reports, they try to say, well, the young girl was beaten and John McCabe wasn't. We don't know what happens to somebody that does things like this over a period of 5 years. But Sergeant Braden, who worked both investigations, said the number one suspect in the John McCabe murder is Richard Santos. The case was taken by the state police, and assumptions were made that someone else was going to follow up on Santos and John McCabe. It never happened, members of this jury. It never happened. No one ever followed up on it. Certainly, the only time anyone followed up on it was 4 weeks ago, when Detective Coughlin found out about it. And I'll suggest to you, when she went to investigate, she didn't investigate any of the people we just talked about, Santos, Morley, Collins, the priest, until after Michael Ferreira was arrested. After. And I'll suggest that investigation was not to determine whether they were actually involved. It was to get ready for cross-examination and explain away why they weren't. Detective Conlon ever challenge Ed Brown? Did she ever say to him, why are you saying just like in the movie, if the movie didn't come out until 71? Why, hey, Mr. Brown, you're telling us there's this struggle, 4 people involved in a struggle out there in that field. Why don't we have any evidence of struggle? Detectives looked in 1969, there's no evidence of struggle. She didn't ask Ed Brown, why are you telling me there's struggle when there wasn't? Why are you telling me there's no tape on the eyes when there was? Did she ask those critical questions? No. How about this question asked? If she truly knew about the call to the priest, what question would you ask? Hey, Mr. Brown, anybody take his belt? Anybody wearing gloves? She didn't even ask that question. She didn't want to know the answer. The answer he gave you. No, no one took his belt, and no, no one was wearing gloves. Lividity, she never considered lividity. Lividity tells you John McCabe died elsewhere and was left in that field. Father Walsh, I talked about Father Walsh and Father Cahill. Detective Tom Sullivan. There's been a denial that people were fed information. Detective Lieutenant Sullivan told you that in front of the grand jury, even Lieutenant Sullivan was fed hog-tied in front of the grand jury. He knew it not to be true. He knew nothing at the scene or photograph suggested John McCabe was hog-tied, but in front of the grand jury, he answered in the affirmative. Yes, he was found hog-tied. When he wasn't. Mr. O'Reilly, if Mr. O'Reilly has the ability to feed false information to a 30-year state police detective lieutenant, what do you think could happen to Ed Brown? And Mr. Sullivan told you, yeah, I talked about it a little while ago, I need reports to refresh my memory. Lieutenant Sullivan also told you, Mike Ferreira was never given statements to review when he was asked questions in 03 and 08. And Lieutenant Sullivan did acknowledge, hey, it's not unreasonable for somebody 39 years later to tell the story that Mike Ferreira tells about the night, about stripping floors, about rides all over town, about things that were completely inconsistent from 1969 because of 39 years later. What did Lieutenant Sullivan tell you regarding interrogations and interrogation schools that he's been to? You would not want to feed your theory of a prosecution or how a crime happened to a suspect or a witness. You would not want to show the manner and method in which they died in the field, because you're going to compromise that person's ability to tell what happened. They're going to adopt what you're telling them and what you're showing them, and that's exactly what happened. Nancy Ferreira, I guess she was pretty clairvoyant, because in 1969 she had the wherewithal to look in the future, while her 3-year boyfriend, Bobby Ryan, at the time, she was going to come up with an alibi for the husband she wouldn't even meet till he's back from Vietnam. She wouldn't date till he's back in Vietnam, and then marry and come up with an alibi 43 years ago. She was that clairvoyant and had that foresight to think that far in the future. She just told you what she told them in 1969. Dr. Andrew, and the same for Dr. Springer. They told you about science. Dr. Andrew told you there was no hog tie. There is no evidence of hog tie. And that body was moved. And that body wasn't moved. Dr. Springer told you that if the planets align and he's moved, and Mr. O'Reilly and Cross asked a different question of Dr. Andrew. He said to Dr. Andrew, if John McCabe died at midnight and he was moved at 9 a.m., what was the question he asked Dr. Springer? If John McCabe died at midnight and was moved at 11, Dr. Andrew, when he was asked, would lividity shift if he was even moved at 9 a.m.? And we know it wasn't discovered until 9:40. 9 hours later. Remember Dr. Andrew? He went, he's like, ooh, that's a stretch. A young boy, skinny boy, no. Lividity is locked. Lividity is locked. It's not going to shift after 9 hours. Even Dr. Springer told you 8 hours, if conditions are perfect, and the body's frozen, those type of things, and you can press it. You look at those photographs, you look at the photographs, there is full lividity on the back. John McCabe died on his back and was left alone. This was not a fact-finding case. This was a fact-feeding case. comes from Jack Ward. Jack Ward tells you, he hears the rumors back in 1997, and he dresses them up a little bit. Now he says, I'm at the Walmart, this is in 2002, he's telling the police. In 1969, I'm at the Walmart Drive-In, and I'm watching The French Connection, and he dresses it up a little bit more. He says that Shelley and Mike Ferreira and Derek Stone and Butch Kendall and others were at the movies, where John McCabe's tied up just like in the movies. Lieutenant Sullivan reports it, Mr. O'Reilly adopts it without checking it out. He resells it to Lieutenant Sullivan at the grand jury, and then they give it to Ed Brown. And Ed Brown adopts it, just like in the movie. The problem, as you know, John McCabe was never hogtied. And now, Commonwealth has spent considerable time untying themselves from the hogtie, because he never was hogtied. Think of where the motive and the suspects came from. Jack Ward. He comes up. Do you remember the bingo moment? Bingo, he said. I put it all together. This is jealousy over Marla Shiner. Walter Shelley's responsible. And then he goes to the police on that. And you remember his testimony. Is it just a coincidence that when he comes up with a bingo moment that is jealousy over Shiner with Walter Shelley, he also tells the police in 02, oh, and by the way, John McCabe told me he had a crush on Marla Shiner. 30 years later, he says, oh, there's a crush. And that was the same, when I cross-examined him, he told you that there were two conversations, one at the beginning of the pig roast cookout and one at the end, but in 2002, because it came at the end of the pig roast, he was too drunk to remember to tell the police. He was too drunk in 97, but he couldn't remember the conversation in 02, but he remembered it clearly in 2011. It's a bit of good fortune for Michael Ferreira that field was not developed. So much development. A bit of good fortune that smokestack's there, that railroad tower's there, that field's there, and that filter's there. O'Reilly's going to tell you that he wants you to find Mike Ferreira guilty because of Ed Brown's repressive memory. He told you that is the basis for his testimony. He defined it. Repressive memory is the basis for his testimony. Perhaps that's why we heard from Elaine Callahan, Sutton, and Marianne Richard regarding the statements Mike said in 1969 as a 16-year-old kid. There's no question. No question. John McCabe died. It's a horrific event. It's a tragedy. And the McCabe family suffers. There is no question about that. But I appeal to your reason and I appeal to your logic. You have heard the medical evidence. You have seen the scene evidence. You have seen the physical evidence. Edgar Allan Brown simply did not have anything to do with it. It didn't happen. His story that he tells you, you know from the scene evidence, from the medical evidence, and the physical evidence, his story didn't happen. John McCabe was left in that field after he was already dead. Everywhere you turn, in this case, everywhere you turn, there is reasonable doubt. Let's go through it. The tire impressions I talked to you about. No signs of a struggle. There is no hog tie. Consider the source where that came from. Jack Ward. McCabe's body is dry when it rained. Lividity. Motive. There's no credible evidence of jealousy. There's no credible evidence that Shelley and China were even dating. I asked Ed Brown, 1971, you're both stationed in the Midwest and you meet each other for a 2-weekend. Mr. Brown, just the two of you alone, does this make any sense to you at all? Just the two of you alone, no one's around. You don't say, your story's the truth. You don't say, hey, feel bad about that? No. Does that make sense to you? Not told he's taught a lesson. How about this? Another thing. Unreported interviews and interrogation. Ed Brown still can't get a story straight. Everywhere he looks. There's no physical evidence. You were told time and time again. There is no physical evidence connecting Michael Ferreira to the death of John McCabe. Not only that, there's no physical evidence against Walter Shelley, and there is no physical evidence against Alan Brown. Santos, we've gone over Santos. Morley, the collars, the priest, the belt, the gloves. Everywhere you turn in this case, you simply cannot believe Edward Allen Brown based on his promise that he's going to tell you the truth. He has disregarded it, and I believe I showed you that so many times. And if he were truly involved in this, these are things he has to know, but he doesn't. I told you in my opening, perhaps the most critical question you may have, but you don't have to answer, is why? Why is Alan Brown not telling you the truth? I'll suggest to you that desperate people will do desperate things. But what he told you does not match anything else you've heard in this case. John McCabe, body and the manner of his death tell you that Edward Allen Brown's story doesn't make any sense. Now, I'm done. The Constitution gives police, prosecutors, an awesome power. Take citizens, arrest citizens, bring them before juries, and try them. Take away liberty, try them on offenses. That is an awesome power. But that same Constitution, members of this jury, gives even a greater power. And that greater power is to a collective group of citizens, just like you. If you think about it, there is no greater power for any collection of individuals, group of individuals, than the American jury system. That same power that gives the prosecutors the ability to arrest and try people requires that they convince that jury, that collective jury, beyond a reasonable doubt, to extinguish the doubt with respect to elements of the offense. And everywhere you turn in this case, everywhere you turn, there is reasonable doubt. Mr. O'Reilly gets to go last, the way that works. Now, I may not have thought of everything. I'm running out of time. I don't have time to tell you everything in this case. But Mr. O'Reilly suggests something, mentioned something to you that I didn't cover, and I ask you on the presumption that Michael has. But you think, well, how would Wilson respond to that? Mr. O'Reilly's going to get up and tell you what a tragedy the death of John McCabe was and is to him and to his family. There is no question. We know that, and you know that. You cannot, as a human, as a parent, you cannot not have anguish for that family. But you cannot answer their questions through the evidence that has been presented to you. On behalf of Michael Ferreira, Stanley and I thank you for your time and your support. And I know you exercise that obligation, that great power that you have.